Hello everyone, Paul from High Tech Legion, and today we have something special. If you all remember, I said that AMD was a failure when it came out with the 290X. And yes, it was a failure. The reference card heated up to 95 degrees. We had a lot of problems with it. It liked to throttle. Now if you remember, I also said that heat causes failure. Anytime you have excessive heat on any type of PCB or any type of processor, GPU or CPU, you're going to have failure eventually. No, it wasn't built to go that way, because if it was built to go that way, then all the other manufacturers, meaning the add-in board partners, which would be Asus, Sapphire, etc., wouldn't have to worry about putting these big extra coolers on top of it. But I do have something here to show you guys, and this is the Sapphire Tri-X R9 290. Now, the 290 also does throttle. It didn't run as hot, it didn't throttle as much, but Sapphire has put together something very well with this model. The Tri-X cooling is awesome. It only heats up to about 70 degrees, and that's in Florida, and yes, it was 80 degrees up until about a few days ago, and that's when I tested it. Now, this does come overclocked, and as I said, it has a Tri-X cooler on it. You might be very familiar with that if you read or looked at our toxic reviews. But the difference to this is it has three 90mm fans, not two 90s and one 80. So, let's go ahead, I'll show you what the card looks like, and we'll be right back. Alright everyone, so we have now in my hand, or hands, the Sapphire R9 290. Which has the Tri-X cooler on it. As you can see, we have three fans up in the front. They're 90mm fans. We have a nice shroud covering it. If I turn it this way, you can see that it does have a very nice plate to keep the board very steady. This is the back of the PCB, and here is the heatsink. Of course, it is PCIe 3.0. You have dual DVIs, an HDMI, and a display port. It is going to require one 8-pin and one 6-pin power connector. As I said before, I heated this card up. I ran it quite a few times. I looped Unigen. The highest I got it was to 72 degrees. Does it throttle? No. The lowest that this card went down to was actually 983 megahertz. And the reason why it did that is because there are a couple scenes in Unigen, Heaven, that doesn't use the CPU when it, or the GPU actually, when it changes the scene, so you might lose 10 to 20 megahertz. Which is a big nothing. So it doesn't mean that this card throttled at all. In a couple seconds, I'm going to show you how quiet it is. We're going to go ahead and we're going to focus on the card in my test bed, and we're going to listen to the fan on three different settings. We're going to listen to it on normal, I'm going to crank it to 50, and then I'm going to crank it to 100. This is very quiet. It does not sound like a jet engine. Alright everyone. Right now, as you can see, I have everything at idle. The temperature is 31 degrees Celsius. It's on auto fan, so it's at 20% right now. And you really cannot hear the fan at all. So I'm going to go ahead and crank it up a little bit for you. We're going to enable auto manual fan. And I'm just going to go up to 50%. Click apply. Now you can kind of hear that starting to kick a little bit. But still, no way, no how is this any or as loud as the stock or reference model is. It's actually very quiet. And in a second I will actually show you the actual setup so you can see how I have it. But I just wanted to give you guys an idea on what's going on without me playing with anything. We're up to 75% now. It's audible, but we got to remember this is outside of a case. It doesn't sound like a jet engine. And we will then go ahead and crank it to 100. Click apply. And that's at 100%. Now, while gaming, I never saw, on auto, I never saw it go over 40% fan speed. And that's cranking it up to 72 degrees where it normally runs while you're gaming. So now I will go ahead and stop this for a second. I will leave it at 100%. I'm going to focus down on the system itself so you can see the system, so you know that I'm not lying. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to go straight down. So as you can see, it is running in the system. The fan should be on. I'll go ahead and turn on a light, see if we get a better view of that. I'm going to go ahead and crank it down to 50%. Okay. As you can see, calm, cool, and quiet. There's no need to crank this to 100%. I threw everything I could at it, looped Unigine Heaven for over an hour, and as I said, it didn't go over 72. And now we'll go ahead and set it back to manual or auto. Click apply. And blammo. While we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and crank up Unigine Heaven here for a minute and just let it run. Okay. So we'll go ahead and start the benchmark. I'll move the window over. I'll bring up Catalyst Control Center one more time. Go back to the Performance app, which is AMD Overdrive. And you'll notice it's at 1000 megahertz, the GPU clock, and it'll basically stay there. There is really no throttling on this card at all. Sapphire has done a great job keeping the temperatures at an acceptable level to where the card is not going to overheat and cause it to throttle. We're up to 60 Celsius. Hopefully you can see the screen where it says 1000 megahertz. Maybe if I close the light it might be a little bit easier to see. Up to 62, we're still at 1000 megahertz. 63, and so on. Fan speed is up to 30%. It's basically inaudible. .65 Celsius. Still at 1000. Okay, if you just saw that little drop, that's where when it spins, where I mentioned that there's a couple different areas where you might get a drop. It did drop a little bit, but that's normal with Unigine. I could put any other card on there and you will definitely see a drop when it comes to that. we're at 67 Celsius and 33% fan speed and still at 1000 megahertz. As I said, the lowest it went was 993, 987, and that was just for a second while it actually flipped through different screens, etc. So we'll go ahead and stop with this portion. We're at 69 Celsius right now. We're only at 36% fan speed. I'm going to let you listen to it for just a couple seconds. I'll go ahead and stop the benchmark. Well, actually, I'll keep the benchmark on. But as you can see, you'll notice I don't have the film on, the sound up very loud, and you cannot hear these fans running. Alright, so that's it for that part of the demonstration. I guess you're wondering about benchmarks. We did run benchmarks on it. And yes, I ran them multiple times to see if I got different benchmarks. I did not. They remained the same. Maybe within one frame, maybe one frame over. So there was no fluctuation where I lost with the 290X, the stock 290X, where I was losing 5 or 6 frames a second when I would throttle. There was no throttling at all. So everything was in a margin of error. So let's go ahead and go over these benchmarks. Our first round of benchmarks was 3D Mark and Test Mark. In 3D Mark Firestrike, we got a total of 9471 with a graphics score of 10608 and a physics score of 13106. Test Mark, we got a total score of 4966. Our second round of benchmarks, we ran BioShock, Tomb Raider, Metro Last Light, and Crysis 3. In BioShock, we averaged 81.9 frames a second. In Tomb Raider, we averaged 77.4 frames a second. Metro Last Light, 72.3 frames a second. And finally, in Crysis 3, 52.1 frames a second. For our third round of benchmarks, we ran Battlefield 4, we ran Far Cry 3, Batman Arkham Origins, and Skyrim. Skyrim received 149.3 frames a second. Batman Arkham Origins, 120 frames a second. Far Cry 3, 65 frames a second. And Battlefield 4, 80 frames a second. And last but not least was our Unigine benchmarks, which would be Heaven and Valley. In Unigine Heaven, 57.2, and in Unigine Valley, 58.7. I'll go ahead and give you my final thoughts on the card in a second. Okay everyone, now that we've actually seen how the card runs, listened to the fan speed, heard about the benchmarks, and actually saw the benchmarks, we're going to go ahead and give the Sapphire R9 290 Tri-X an Editor's Choice Award. It cools very well. Sapphire did a great job where AMD failed. This is the way it should have been done in the first place. We have a nice overclock to 1000 megahertz on this. Of course, this card does have UEFI BIOS. It's compatible with UEFI BIOS. You're also, which a lot of people don't give you, you're getting an HDMI cable included with this. Of course, you have Sapphire tricks if you want to overclock it. I didn't do any overclocking on the card this time. Got the card a little bit late, right before CES. Didn't have an opportunity. I might do it when I get back from CES. But again, Sapphire does AMD right. If you want a good card, If you want an R9 290 series, I would definitely check out the Sapphire R9 Tri-X. And they also have a Toxic 290X, which added an extra vapor chamber in it. And I hear that that one cools just as well as this one. So that's it, everyone. Thank you for watching. Make sure you visit us at www.hightechlegion.com for the full review. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Please do that. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's twitter.com/hightechlegion. And of course on Facebook, facebook.com/HTL Reviews. Stay thirsty, my friends. CES is coming up, so you better watch. Have a great day, and bye-bye.